Hello, I'm Tootight Lautrec and welcome to the Shakey Sonnet Show. Do you ever wonder, why am I here? What is my purpose? Do you ever wake up in the morning and splash yourself with water to rinse off the staleness that collects whilst living your daily life? Do you ever go through the clinking, clanking, clunking collection of wine bottles that may have collected on your floor after spending another night awake, alone, again? And you think to yourself, well, I might just as well get up and smell the coffee, only to find that there's no coffee left. And then, after the tea and the toast with butter and honey, after arranging your glitter in the most accessible and aesthetically pleasing way, and combing out your wig and placing it on your head, looking in the mirror, even though you have no place to go, do you ever just sit down and think, what is it all about? Well, if so, you're not alone, but you've certainly turned into the wrong channel. I don't have any of the answers to those questions. If you're really interested, you might want to go up the stairs across the empty parking lot to where the shysters and the snake oil salespeople hang out. But here we are at the Shakey Sonnets show, and that's all we're concerned about are the 154 sonnets of Shakespeare's oeuvre. We're here in our new digs here at the bottom of the down staircase in the recently sequestered remainder section of an unnamed local library, which may or may not have a lion couchant or two on its grand staircase. But suffice it to say that after the whole debacle in the sub basement of PS 75, the Emily Dickinson School, we're somewhere over the rainbow and another place way, way, way under the radar at the Shakey Sonnet Show. And when I say we, I mean, of course, me and my faithful companion, Sergio. We're here to discuss all of the wonders that are in Shakespeare's 154 sonnets. Today's class, it will actually not be a class, it's simply the introduction. And it's going to serve to set the ground rules for how we'll proceed over the next 154 weeks. Now, we might just as well jump right in and get started by asking, what is a sonnet? A sonnet is a poem of 14 lines, usually, most often, with a set rhyme scheme. We think the inventor of the sonnet may have been a 13th century Italian called Giacomo da Lentini. Other Italian poets, of course, kept the sonnet tradition alive: Dante, Michelangelo, Cavalcanti. But the form didn't really become famous until the 14th century with Francesco Petrarca, who we also credit as being the founder of humanism. Now, that was in Italian. There were also some French sonneteers, but it didn't really come to the English language until Sir Thomas Wyatt brought it into the language. Sir Thomas Wyatt lived from 1503 to 1542, and he had translated Italian sonnets into the English, in effect introducing the sonnet form to the English language. So let's talk first about the Italian sonnet, also called the Petrarchan sonnet. It's a poem of 14 lines with a particular rhyme scheme of A, B, B, A, B, B, A, C, D, E, C, D, E. So the first two sets of 4 lines, which are called quatrains, the first 2 sets, because they make up 8 lines, is called an octave. And the second set of 6 lines is called a sestet. So the first 8 lines, or the octave, forms the argument for the poem, and then there's a turn in sense or in logic called the volta, which simply means turn in Italian. And then the sestet is the resolution to the argument put forth in the octave. So then we come over to English. So Thomas Wyatt began to translate the Italian sonnets into English, but then Henry Howard, the Earl of Surrey, who lived around the same time as Wyatt, changed the rhyme scheme to A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, G, G. So now we have 3 quatrains and a couplet. So 4 lines, 4 lines, 4 lines, and 2 lines for the couplet. And the volta may or may not be in there. There's a turn of sense in some of the poems. Sometimes there's not. Sometimes it simply comes with the couplet, which is often a summarizing moment. So now that was the Earl of Surrey who changed the rhyme scheme and made what is called now the English sonnets. There's the Italian sonnet, or the Petrarchan sonnet, and the English sonnet, which, because Shakespeare was so prolific, is also called the Shakespearean sonnet. The sonnet craze didn't really get started until maybe 25 years later with Sir Philip Sidney when he wrote Astrophil and Stella. And then everybody and their brother was writing sonnets. So on top of the particular rhyme scheme for the 14 lines, each line is a set of 10 syllables in what's called iambic pentameter, which is simply an unstressed syllable followed by a stressed syllable. So you have 5 sets of unstressed, stressed, unstressed, stressed, and so on, until you get 10 syllables. Now, everybody's so concerned about iambic pentameter, but the easiest way for you to remember that is to think of the simple short sentence, I am, putting the emphasis on am. Say it 5 times. I am, I am, I am, I am, I am. Big pentameter. That's how you remember iambic pentameter. Now, of course, there are variations within the sonnets to keep things fresh, as it were, to shock you into a moment of notice, and we may or may not talk about those as we go along. But that's the basic construction. 14 lines, particular rhyme scheme, A, B, A, B, C, D, C, D, E, F, E, F, G, G for the Shakespearean sonnet in iambic pentameter. Now, to the larger question, the larger questions, excuse me, because there are many, about Shakespeare and his sonnets. There are a couple of questions that pop up perpetually in the 400 years since he's written them. The first being, were they indeed written by Shakespeare? Another question is, were all of the sonnets written by Shakespeare? Is the now standard order of the sonnets from 1 to 154 the original ordering? Is it the best ordering? Is it the ordering that Shakespeare wanted? Are the sonnets autobiographical? Are they true emanations from Shakespeare's heart to someone else? Are they simply exercises in the dramatic form from one speaker to another? Do the sonnets in their now standard arrangement form what's called a sonnet sequence, or some sort of a novel in sonnets where there's a beginning and a middle and an end? There's a development throughout. Are the first 126 sonnets really love poems to a young man? Was Shakespeare gay? Well, just so you know, I happen to have the answer to all of those questions. The answer is, I don't know, and neither does anybody else. There are a lot of really, really smart people out there who have theories and propound their theories and look at the sonnets through the lens of each of those theories, and we'll talk about those as we go along. your best bet would be to follow the link that I'm going to include in the description box below. There's a lively talk between the most renowned Shakespearean scholars in the world right now, Paul Edmondson, Stanley Wells, and Jonathan Bate, sit down and talk about all of these issues at the University of Warwick. And it's about a 30-minute long video, but it's well worth your time, and it's a marvelous place to start before we start on our journey. I'll go back to those issues that are being raised as they come up in the sonnets, but I say look at that video. You won't be disappointed. It's intensely interesting, and I think it's a wonderful place to start. Now, one of the things that I'm going to be most interested in is where do these sonnets, not just what do they mean, because for goodness sakes, the language is 400 years old. It changes. And a sonnet is language squished into a particular framework in order to express something. And Shakespeare in particular is an amazing person to study simply because the breadth of emotion and the situations that we see are different from so many of the other sonnet cycles. So I'm going to be interested in looking at, is there evidence of an actual gendered person or recipient for these poems? In looking at whether any of these poems are gendered, I'm going to be using a little prop. And I got the idea because I have a wonderful little smarty pants named Caleb, who is one of my favorite smarty pantses, and he's fascinated with Harpo Marx and his clown horn. And so I'm stealing Caleb's idea, and every time I see that there's some sort of a gendered reference in any of the poems, I'm going to let you know. If it happens to be a girl, oh, that's a bit louder, isn't it? Well, can't help that. So, I'll be using these props to figure out if indeed the speaker or the recipient of the sonnet itself is clearly of one gender or another. That's one of the things that we'll be doing. One other thing to prepare you before we go for our Shakespeare experience. I'll walk him over to the edge here and let him rest. Unfortunately, he doesn't have a... His little ruff is a little too big for his booty, so I'm going to stand him there and hope that he does okay. I'm going to tell you the references that we're going to be using if you'd like to read along or look it up yourself or tell me something that I don't know or that I didn't say, which will happen quite a bit. For my main reference, I'm going to be using the Signet Classic Shakespeare series of the sonnets, which is right here. If you do get these, I like them because they're very small and you can carry them anywhere. They're very lightweight. If you get them, make sure that you get the one that says New Revised Edition, because I have another one which is a little worse for the wear, which does not have this little badge that says New Revised Edition. And lo and behold, they're different. There are different words. And we'll be talking about that when we do Sonnet 1 in our next lesson. But I found it quite interesting, and if you're going to use the Signet Shakespeare Sonnets, use the one that says New and Revised Edition. Or get both of them if you can find this one that isn't revised, and it's a very interesting read. Also, one of the main things I'm going to be using is Stephen Booth's Shakespeare Sonnets. I found this book about the entire book is a long essay basically about Shakespeare Sonnets by Paul Edmondson and Stanley Wells, two of the people who are in the University of Warwick YouTube video that I recommend. There's also this version, and what these versions offer is a slightly different, sometimes they have different annotations And sometimes they have, well, they always have a different introduction. So they'd be worth looking at. This is the Royal Shakespeare Society, edited by Jonathan Bate, the third person who is in the video that I recommend, and Eric Rasmussen. This one, I don't care about that. I also got, yes, I got them. I have Cliff's Notes, Shakespeare's Cliff Notes. On the sonnets, there are two different versions, and they're both very interesting, and there's nothing wrong with using Cliff's Notes. If you use Cliff's Notes in the right way, it gives you a ton of information, and they're very informative, and you should never be ashamed of using them. If you're going to be cheating on a test, you should be ashamed from tip to toe, but reading Cliff's Notes is a very good thing. I also use the Oxford Shakespeare, the Complete Sonnets and Poems, edited by Colin Burrow. And this one, it has many of the sonnets here, but it has, for each particular sonnet, it has a different section with the annotations and a little bit of commentary. There's also the much cited Catherine Duncan Jones, not to be confused with Catherine, what's her name? Zeta. Catherine Zeta Jones. There's the New Cambridge Shakespeare Sonnets, edited by Blakemore Evans, and the commentary section again is in the back, and it's pretty extensive. And that's that. Also, Don Patterson's Reading Shakespeare Sonnets. This is very funny. I agree with many of the things he says. I don't agree with many of the other things he says, but he's a very smart man, and I really enjoyed this. And then there's Helen Vendler's tome, The Art of Shakespeare Sonnets, in which she gives extensive contemplation to each and every Shakespeare sonnet. And not my favorite, to tell you the truth. If you like her, go for it. Tell me something I don't know. I'll dip into her every once in a while, and I may cite her. What I do like about it is that, well, no, I don't really like that much about it. I'm putting that there. My favorite, if you're going to only choose two things, I would say go to the YouTube video that I mentioned and get Shakespeare Sonnets written by Stephen Booth, edited by Stephen Booth. Extensive. It's amazing. He's wonderful. So that ends my introduction. From this point forward, it's onward and upward with the sonnets. If you're interested in Shakespeare sonnets, welcome aboard. If you've simply been assigned to read a Shakespeare sonnet and can't make head nor tails of it, welcome along. Ask me anything. I may not know the answer, but I'll do my very best. So, until then, until the next time that we meet, I'm Tootight Lautrec. This is the Shakey Sonnet Show. I'm not going to let you off the hook. I still need you to pay attention to everything that you see in the world, because it's full of wonder. And a man from 400 years ago will show us just how wonderful it is. Pay attention. I'm Tootight Lautrec. Mwah.